Hi, it's Nicola Bird here from alittlepeaceofmind.co.uk. I'm doing this little short series of videos at the moment, kind of back to basics if you like, about the fundamentals of what I teach and share with my clients. And this is part 3, so if you've missed part 1 and 2, maybe go back and watch those first. You can find them on my YouTube channel or my website. And today what I wanted to talk to you about is how I work with clients, like what I help them to see. So this is a flip chart from the last 2 weeks where we've talked about the example we're kind of using is that my work is stressing me out and making me feel anxious, right? But you can insert anything into this box, right? So your kids, your family, your health, your ideas about travel or weddings or pubs or whatever it is that is your thing that you find problematic. Now, here's how I work with my clients. So I have a client that will come in to see me, or actually I do most of my work online, but so I have a client that will show up and talk to me and they will share their story. Yeah. And we'll stick with the same example just for continuity, right? So they'll tell me about my email inbox like this, my boss, my work, the time pressure, what's this doing to my family, and this awful feeling that I'm walking around in. Now, traditional psychology, traditional therapy, you would go and talk to your therapist and your therapist would say, well, tell me about your life and tell me about, like, how did you get on last week? Tell me about last week. And so you'll tell them all about everything you did. Well, I did this and then I tried that and then my boss did this and then that upset me. So then I tried that and then I did this and that went really well. And then I had a panic attack and that was really awful. And so there'll be a sharing of the story of our lives in the last week or our past history, depending on whether you're meeting your therapist for the first time or every week. And the therapist will listen to you and they will listen to analyze, like, what's the problem here? What's stopping you from being happy? And they'll listen and they'll analyze and they'll process what it is that you're saying and they'll help you try and figure it out. And then between you, you'll try and figure out what the problem is in your life or your thinking so that you can fix it and then you'll be okay, right? But what happens is that you talk it through and you find some sense of relief and you go away and then next week you come back and you've got another whole set of problems, right? And then you go away and you come back and you've got another whole set of problems. And it's just like a continual, that's why people find themselves 10 years later still in therapy, right? Because the mind can always create problems. And that's, I guess, the essence of starting to talk about what it is how I work differently with clients. So when a client comes to see me, I want to hear what they have to say, right? About their lives and to give me some context and so I can find out more about them so I can get to know them a little bit better, right? But what's important to me with their clients will then start to tell me like why they've booked the session and what they're finding problematic in their lives. And what I'm interested in listening for, or what I am interested in sharing with my clients is not diving into here and trying to figure out how to solve the problem that they're currently facing. I want to point them to the fact that they are creating this problem that only exists at this level of consciousness. So what do I mean by that? You're going to recognize this when I tell this to you, right? So my client has this terrible workplace. It's all a nightmare, right? And then one day they come into the office and they're in a really good mood, right? Like they got up out on the right side of the bed, right? You know, those random days where it's just, you get up and you're in a good mood. And that client, if I was to call them up and go, how's it going at work today? They would say, do you know what? The sun's shining through the office and I'm really grateful I get to come and hang out with this bunch of people. Like I've got a full inbox, I've got loads to do and I feel like I get to contribute loads. My work is meaningful. You know that feeling when you have like, there is nowhere I'd rather be than right here, right now. I love my job, right? Or I love my family. I love my husband. I love my whatever, right? You have a completely different experience of it because you're in a good mood, right? Sounds so obvious, sounds so simple, right? But all that's going on is that different realities occur at different levels of consciousness. So at a lower level of consciousness, this is the same for all of us, by the way. At a lower level of consciousness, we look out through our eyes and thought creates an experience of a shitty looking world. Like, it looks dreadful, it looks gloomy, it looks like there's no hope, we feel lonely, we feel isolated, we feel like the world is out to get us. Like, pick your flavor of what happens when you go into a low mood, right? But it looks like the boss is constantly, giving you too much work to do. It looks like you're getting complaints left, right and centre. It looks like you're dropping the ball all of the time in this lower state of mind, and it doesn't feel very good, right? We think we're feeling our work environment. We're feeling all that thinking. We're feeling our level of consciousness. We're feeling our mood, if you like. But what's key in change is seeing that at any moment a shift in consciousness is possible, and the same situation no longer appears problematic. So there are infinite levels of consciousness, right? Up, down, and at every single one of them, you'll tell me a different story about your workplace. Promise you. Every single one of them. There are infinite varieties of your workplace. The stories you would tell me. If I rang you on 365 days of the year, you'd probably tell me 365 different stories. Sometimes if I rang you an hour later, you'd tell me a different story about what's actually really going on in my workplace, right? But I promise you, if I recorded you and played them back to you, one day you would be saying something negative and the next day you're saying something positive, and everything in between. Sometimes it's so overwhelming you can't handle it, and some days you're so grateful to have the job that you have, even though nothing is different in the outside world. Now, this is what I help my clients to see more about. One of the things that I help them to see is that their experience of the world is being created through thought as a product of the current level of consciousness that they're in. Now, this changes the game entirely, because you'll come in and you'll tell me about your past week, and then I'll talk to you about this thing, which seems totally unrelated to your horrible boss in your email inbox. And then you'll come in next week and you'll tell me a different story, maybe about your family and how you're struggling because you're not sleeping, and so you're short-tempered with your family. And it'll look like I might feel like I'm ignoring your content and your story and your problem. You never think it's a story, you think it's a problem, right? So sorry, I'm ignoring your problem. I'm talking to you about this weird thing about levels of consciousness and that thought creates experience. You're like, what's that got to do with my kids, right? And so what I'm asking you to consider this week is that there's a completely different way of approaching what's going on with you than you might be used to. That you're used to going and telling your friends, your family, your therapists, your doctor about your problems, and them listening to you and them sorting through the content of your problems to try to help you the best they can. But this is more helpful. To start to understand how we all work, how our experience is being created. It's like magic. I don't really understand the mechanics. All I know is that as we understand how something works better, we use it better, our experience of it changes, we can't become less fearful because we kind of start to see the connection. And it allows us not to take our thinking so seriously when we understand how it works, that everything we think is, well, of course I would think that in this mood. Of course I would think that in this mood. Of course I would think that in this mood. We start to see how it works. It changes our relationship to thought. And because thought creates our experience, it changes our relationship to our experience. And it stops us being so scared of it. And it stops us being so hung up on our problem stroke story and how it's appearing right now in this moment. It just does. There's something about understanding how we all work that's the same that changes everything. So this week, I guess, just for you to consider, to take a look for yourself, is it true for you that you can have the same family or the same workplace or the same health diagnosis or the same husband or the same wife or the same number in your bank account, and yet from one day to another, sometimes it looks great and sometimes it looks rubbish. Sometimes it looks, you're so grateful for it, and sometimes it's intolerable, and it's the same thing. And take a look and see if that's true for you, and then come back and watch this video again maybe and see, starting to understand why. And that's all. And every time we see something that's true about how life works for all of us, it settles us down. And as we settle down, life gets better and easier and simpler and less stressful without you having to change anything in your email inbox. I'll be back with you with another video next week.